What happens when a morning show built on warmth and relaxed conversation welcomes a guest who refuses to play along? On this episode of CBS Mornings, Meghan Markle arrives expecting yet another softened platform. What she encounters instead are Gayle, Kings.com but persistent questions, and three anchors who slowly realize they're caught in the middle of a live on-air powder keg. By the time the cameras stop rolling, the royal image, the friendly set, and the unspoken rules of daytime television are all left in ruins. The CBS morning studio glowed in soft golds and creams, like a palace reimagined for New York television. Tall, ornate panels framed a backdrop, lit just enough to shimmer without pulling focus from the central couches. On one side sat Gayle King in a sharp red pantsuit, posture open yet composed, papers resting neatly on her lap. Tony Dokoupil and Nate Burleson sat beside her in navy and charcoal suits, both relaxed, both smiling, both seasoned in early morning chaos. The only thing that felt different was the air itself. It carried a quiet anticipation, the kind that made camera operators double-check their shots and producers glance at monitors one extra time. "Stand by," a voice called from behind the cameras. "We're coming back in 3, 2. The light above the main camera flared red. "Welcome back to CBS Mornings," Gayle said, her voice as warm and smooth as ever. "We're joined now by a woman who is no stranger to global attention. She is an actress, a mother, a philanthropist, and of course, the Duchess of Sussex. Meghan Markle is here with us in studio. Meghan, good morning." Meghan sat on the far-left couch, angled slightly toward the three hosts. She wore a fitted navy dress that framed her shoulders and fell neatly below her knees, paired with nude heels and perfectly arranged waves cascading over one shoulder. Her hands rested folded in her lap, but her chin was lifted just a touch higher than necessary. Her eyes were steady, her expression carefully neutral. "Morning," she said. No bright smiles, just a faint curve of the lips that never quite reached her eyes. "Thanks for having me." Gayle's smile remained undisturbed. "We're glad you're here," she replied. "You've been at the center of so many conversations over the past few years about the monarchy, the media, mental health, and identity. Today, we want to talk about where you are now, and how life actually feels away from the institution and here in the States." Meghan let out a soft, almost amused exhale. "People always want to know how life feels," she said, making air quotes with one hand. "I suppose that's easier than confronting why it had to change in the first place." A small ripple of polite laughter moved through the audience, though the edge in her words cut sharper than the reaction suggested. Tony leaned forward, picking up the thread. "Well, let's start with something simple," he said. "You've been living in California with Harry and the kids for a few years now. What does a normal day look like for you?" Meghan glanced at him, then back to Gayle, as if weighing whether the question deserved an answer. "A normal day," she repeated, rolling the words slowly. "I'm not sure my life has ever been normal, Tony. People insist on projecting their fantasies onto me. Some think I'm trapped in a castle. Others imagine I'm barefoot in a Montecito garden reading poetry to hummingbirds." Nate chuckled under his breath. "That doesn't sound so bad," he offered, trying to keep things light. Meghan's gaze flicked toward him. "For you, maybe," she replied. "For me, it's just another story written by people who need me to fit into something they can understand." Gayle's fingers tightened slightly around her note cards, though her tone stayed even. "I think what Tony meant," she said, "was more about your routine. School runs, work calls, family time, the things that make up a life." "Right," Meghan said, her voice still cool. "Well, I wake up, I breathe, I exist, I make decisions. The rest is really none of anyone's business, no matter how entitled they feel to it." This time, the audience response was muted. No laughter, just a low murmur. Tony glanced at Gayle. Nate shifted subtly in his seat. Gayle nodded slowly. "You've spoken a lot about feeling scrutinized," she said gently. "Do you feel that even now, being here and talking with us?" Meghan arched a brow. "I feel scrutinized every time someone expects me to package my life into digestible, inspirational sound bites," she said. "I'm not a quote, I'm a person." Nate stepped in, palms open in a calming gesture. "I hear you on that," he said. "At the same time, you have a podcast, you've done major interviews, you've written essays, so clearly you believe in sharing some parts of your story. What makes this different?" Meghan studied him for a moment, then offered a small, tight smile. "My projects are on my terms," she said. "This," she gestured vaguely toward the studio, "the cameras, the hosts, is on yours. There's a difference." Gayle's practiced professionalism didn't slip, though the faintest furrow appeared between her brows. "Let's talk about those terms, then," she said. "You and Harry stepped back from royal duties and began building your own ventures, production, philanthropy. Speaking, some see that as empowering. Others say you've been redefining what royalty means for a new generation. How do you see it?" Meghan tilted her head, her tone drifting toward boredom. "I don't spend my time worrying about how some people see me," she replied. "I didn't leave one institution just to end up trapped in another built out of public opinion." Gayle tried again, her voice still gentle. "But your story has inspired so many people. Do you feel any responsibility to them?" "Responsibility?" Meghan echoed with a faint, humorless laugh. That's such a convenient word people use when they want access. You're expected to share, to smile, to explain, to justify. I think I've done more than enough of that for one lifetime. A strange, tense silence followed. In the control room, a producer leaned closer to the glass, watching every subtle expression. Tony shifted in his seat. I want to bring Harry into this, he said carefully. When you both sat down for that big special a few years ago, viewers saw a couple that seemed very united, very in sync. How has your relationship changed since then, especially with all the pressure and public reaction? Meghan's face hardened slightly. I always find it interesting when people who don't know us at all feel entitled to evaluate our marriage, she said. Harry and I are fine, better than fine. We've endured things that would crush most couples, so if anyone is waiting for a neat little update, they can keep waiting. Nate leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I don't think anyone's grading you, he said gently. I think people just, Meghan cut him off. People just want whatever keeps them entertained, she said. Today, it's me. Tomorrow, it'll be someone else they can dissect. Gayle inhaled slowly, the breath nearly visible. She glanced at her notes, then looked up again, eyes kind but steady. Meghan, I hear your frustration, she said. I really do. But you chose to be here in this chair, on this show. You said you wanted to talk about your work, your projects. What's next? Can you tell us about something you're excited about right now? For the first time, Meghan hesitated. Excited, she repeated, as if the word itself were suspect. I'm excited about moving beyond this constant demand that I explain myself. I'm excited about people learning to focus on causes instead of personalities, though she added, lips curling. Interviews like this do make that difficult. The jab was subtle, but it landed. Tony's eyes flicked to Gayle again. Nate's jaw tightened for a split second. Gayle smiled, but there was new weight in it. All right, she said calmly. Let's talk about causes. Then, you've spoken about mental health, especially after your experience in the UK. Many viewers have connected deeply with that. Have you found healing? Meghan's expression closed further. Healing doesn't perform on command, she said. It doesn't appear just because a morning show segment needs a hopeful arc. The audience made a low, uneasy sound. Gayle's fingers tapped once softly against her cards. I'm not asking you to perform, she replied, her voice still gentle but firmer. I'm asking how you are. That's all. And I'm telling you, Meghan said, that how I am is not a commodity to be unwrapped between commercial breaks. For a long second, the two women simply looked at each other, Gayle measured and composed, Meghan unflinching, almost challenging. Nate cleared his throat, trying to soften the tension. I think what Gayle is saying, he offered, is that many people watching have gone through their own struggles. Hearing how you've coped could really help them. Meghan's eyes flashed. Then maybe those people should seek professionals, she said, not project their healing onto a stranger they've decided to turn into a symbol. Gayle's smile finally cracked. Tony shifted in his seat. The energy in the room shifted from awkward to electric. Okay, Gayle said quietly, gathering herself. Let's take a breath. When we come back, I want to ask you about your children, your life as a mom in America, and how you see their future, whether you still feel connected to the royal family at all. Meghan's gaze sharpened at the mention of her children, at the word royal. She crossed her legs a little tighter, her jaw set. Sure, she said coolly, if we must. The camera light dimmed as they cut to commercial, but the tension remained. In the quiet of the studio, as makeup artists moved in and producers whispered in corners, Gayle sat in her red suit with her eyes on Meghan, already understanding that the next segment wouldn't be just another morning show chat. It would be a test of how far respect could stretch before it finally snapped. The band's smooth transition music faded out, and the red light above the main camera ignited again. The audience straightened in their seats, some exchanging quick looks. They could feel it. The air had thickened. Gayle turned back to the camera, her smile restored but slightly tighter than before. Welcome back to CBS Mornings, she said. We're here with Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, talking about her life, her work, and what comes next. She angled her body toward Meghan, softening her tone. Meghan, before the break we mentioned your children. A lot of parents watching this morning are juggling work, family, and trying to protect their kids from the pressures of the world. How do you and Harry navigate that? For a moment, Meghan simply looked at her, one brow lifted as if deciding how offensive the question was allowed to be. We navigate it, she said at last. By doing something radical, she said, raising our own children instead of outsourcing our judgment to strangers. A small, uneasy laugh came from one corner of the audience, more reflex than amusement. Gayle let it pass, keeping her tone gentle, of course. She replied, what I meant was, given your profile and the attention on your family, do you take extra measures, more security, tighter boundaries, things like that? Meghan's lips thinned. We take the steps any responsible parents would, she said. The fact that people are fascinated by our children doesn't make them any less ours. Tony leaned forward, trying to ease the mood. Do they understand any of it yet? He asked. Do they know they're part of a very famous family? Meghan's gaze cut to him, her eyes cool. They know they're loved, she said. That matters more than teaching them that their family tree is a global spectacle. Totally, Nate said, nodding. But you grew up with a very different reality in royal titles, no palaces. Do you ever worry that, in protecting them, you might also be, I don't know, closing them off from a part of who they are? Meghan's jaw tightened. Are you asking if I feel guilty for giving them a healthier environment than I had? She said sharply. Nate lifted a hand. Not guilty, just wondering if you ever think about that balance. The balance, she echoed, almost mocking. Everyone's obsessed with balance. My job is to keep my children safe, not to fulfill some romantic notion the world has about princes and princesses in gilded cages. Gayle's fingers brushed the edge of her note cards. She'd been in journalism long enough to recognize when someone came to an interview not to talk, but to deflect. Still, she wasn't ready to drop the line of questioning. Let me put it this way, she said. You've said in past interviews that some of what you went through inside the monarchy was deeply painful. If one day one of your children wanted to reconnect with that side of the family, spend time in the UK, maybe even take on some public responsibilities, would you support that? Meghan gave a short, humorless laugh. I find it interesting that people assume my children will spend their lives circling an institution we chose to leave, she said. They're not props in anyone's fantasy about the Spare's kids. If they grow up and decide to explore that world, that will be their choice. But I'm not going to groom them to serve a system that never served me. Tony nodded slowly. So you don't see them as royal at all? I see them as my children, she answered crisply. The world can label them however it needs to sleep at night. The audience murmured. On the far side of the set, a producer rubbed his temples. Already picturing the headlines, Gayle drew in a breath, then let it out. I want to turn to Harry for a moment, she said. We've seen him in interviews, in his book, speaking very openly about his family, about grief, about feeling like the Spare. How is he now? Meghan's expression softened for a fraction of a second, then firmed again, as if she'd caught herself revealing too much. Harry is Harry, she said vaguely. He's finding his way, like all of us, outside structures that were never built to protect him. Does he miss them? Tony asked. His father, his brother. Something flickered in her eyes. Annoyance, maybe, or something more raw. I find it remarkable, Meghan said slowly, that people who've watched those same individuals fail to protect him still insist on framing everything around what he might be missing. Gayle's voice stayed even. Families are complicated, she said. You can be hurt and still miss people. It's not always either. Do you ever imagine a future where there's genuine reconciliation? Meghan's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. The future is not a talk show segment, she replied, and reconciliation is not a storyline you tie up before a commercial break. Whatever happens between Harry and his family will happen privately, if it happens at all. But you've shared a lot of that journey publicly, Gayle pointed out gently. In documentaries, in interviews. Do you ever worry that by saying so much you've made private reconciliation harder? The question lingered. The audience held its breath. Meghan's eyes cooled. What I worry about, she said, each word precise, is this persistent expectation that we should prioritize the comfort of people who benefited from our silence over our right to speak. Gayle's shoulders rose and fell. She nodded, acknowledging the point, even as something in her expression tightened. All right, she said. Let's talk about your life here in America. You've mentioned feeling more free, more able to define yourself on your own terms. What has surprised you most about this chapter? Meghan tilted her head, as if the question bored her. How unwilling people are to accept that I've moved on, she said. They say they're tired of hearing about the monarchy, yet every interview, every headline drags me back there. It's as if they can't cope with the idea that I might exist beyond their fascination. Nate leaned in again, trying to ground the conversation. Okay, then let's go beyond it, he said lightly. What brings you joy right now? A project, a small daily ritual, anything? There was a pause. Meghan looked at him as if he'd asked her to perform a trick. Joy, she repeated, almost skeptically. Joy is private. It's not something I'm required to display like a trophy so people can feel better about the noise they've created around me. Nate sat back, hands raised slightly. Got it, he said, a hint of tension now in his voice. Just asking. Gayle glanced his way. Thank you. I'll take it from here. She turned back to Meghan. You've said several times that you're tired of people wanting pieces of you, she said, and I respect that. I also know that you and Harry have made a conscious decision to remain public figures, to sign deals, to create media about your lives. Some viewers might be watching and thinking, if you don't want to share, why keep doing interviews like this? What would you say to them? Meghan's eyes sharpened, the edges of her patience visibly fraying. I'd say assumptions like that are exactly the problem, she replied. People imagine I'm here because I'm desperate to be seen. Maybe, just maybe, I'm here because I'm constantly being asked to defend myself. And sometimes it's easier to walk into the fire than to keep pretending it isn't burning. The metaphor was dramatic, and she clearly liked it. The audience, less so, shifted again in their seats. Tony and Nate exchanged a glance that silently said, "This is slipping away from us." Gayle stayed still, centered in her red suit, breathing slowly through her nose. "Meghan," she said, her voice soft but firmer now, "I want to be very clear with you and with our viewers. We invited you here because we believe your story matters, and because there is value in hearing directly from you. We're not here to attack you. We are, however, going to ask questions. That's our job." Meghan's chin lifted. "And my job," she shot back, "is to protect myself from being turned into entertainment for people who will never understand what it cost me to leave." "That may be," Gayle replied, a thread of steel finally running through her warmth. "But you are on a television show. People are watching. They're trying to understand. When every question is met with hostility, that makes it harder, not easier." There it was, the first open acknowledgement of the mood in the room. The audience reacted with a low murmur, waiting to see how Meghan would respond. Meghan leaned back, folding her arms, a small, incredulous smile touching her lips. "Hostility," she mused. "Is that what we're calling boundaries now?" Nate's eyes widened slightly. Tony cleared his throat. "I don't think anyone's criticizing boundaries," Tony said carefully. "We're just noticing a lot of tension, which I'm sure our viewers feel too." Gayle didn't break eye contact with Meghan. "We can take a short break," she said, tone neutral, "and reset a little." Meghan's smile sharpened. "If you need one," she said. "I'm quite used to difficult conversations." For the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed Gayle's face, barely there, but real. She pressed her lips together, then looked straight into the camera. "When we come back," she said, calm but clipped, "we'll talk about Meghan's work, her foundation, and what she wants the public to actually focus on if she's willing to tell us." The band picked up the cue. The red light went off, and the show cut to commercial. But in the studio, nothing reset. The tension stayed. Meghan stared ahead, jaw set. A makeup artist hovered uncertainly nearby. Gayle shuffled her cards with more force than necessary. Tony leaned back with a quiet sigh. Nate rubbed a hand over his face. This was no longer just a tough interview. It was a live slow-motion collusion, and they all knew the biggest impact was still coming. Gayle King finally reaches her breaking point. Meghan is removed from the show. The atmosphere in the CBS Mornings studio had shifted from mild discomfort to full-blown strain. Even the quiet hum of the cameras seemed louder, sharper. Meghan sat tall in her navy dress, legs crossed, chin lifted with a poise that didn't read as confidence so much as superiority. Gayle's red suit still glowed under the lights, but the warmth she was famous for was gone. Tony and Nate traded subtle looks. They could feel it. Everyone could. Still, Gayle tried one more time, a final act of grace. "Meghan," she began gently, "a lot of viewers are wondering how you and Prince Harry are handling parenthood now, simply as parents. What has been the biggest challenge?" Meghan blinked slowly, then gave a small, dismissive smirk. "Challenge," she echoed. "I suppose the challenge is that people feel entitled to know everything about our lives. It's exhausting." "Honestly, Gayle, that question feels a bit elementary." Tony closed his eyes for a brief second. Nate exhaled through his nose. Gayle kept her tone even. "I'm sorry if it sounded that way. I only meant," Meghan cut in again. "People always want to hear about the kids because they think it makes me more relatable. I'm not here to be I'm here because I have something meaningful to say." "I thought that was obvious." A few people in the audience shifted, uncomfortable. The silence grew heavier. Gayle forced a soft smile, even as her jaw tightened. "Okay," she said, "let's shift slightly." She flipped to the next card. "Your time in the UK, your experiences there, shaped many of your current projects. When you look back, do you feel?" Meghan sighed dramatically. "Gayle, honestly, why does every interviewer insist on bringing up the past? I've moved on. Everyone else should too." Gayle stayed composed. "It's only because your perspective matters to people." Meghan rolled her eyes, actually rolled them. "Yes, well, that depends on who's asking, doesn't it?" Nate straightened in his chair. Tony gave a small, subtle shake of his head, silently urging Gayle to stay calm. But Gayle pressed on, determined to salvage at least one clear, meaningful answer. "Let me ask you something very simple, then," she said. "Are you happy right now? Truly happy?" Meghan laughed, not kindly, but with a sharp, cutting edge. "Gayle, you make it sound like I'm some tragic figure searching for peace. I'm perfectly fine. More than fine, actually. But the constant questioning makes it very hard to enjoy anything without people twisting it." Gayle nodded slowly. "I understand that, but do you?" Meghan shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you're trying to box me into the same narratives I've heard for years. I came here expecting depth, and instead I'm getting recycled tabloid talking points." That was the breaking point. The room froze. Tony lowered his head. Nate closed his eyes. Gayle drew in a long breath. When she spoke, her voice held no warmth, only calm, unwavering authority. "All right," she said quietly but firmly. "I need to stop you right there." Meghan's eyebrows lifted, offended. "You've interrupted nearly every question," Gayle continued. "You've dismissed them. You've dismissed me. And you've dismissed this audience." Meghan leaned back, folding her arms defensively. "I'm simply being honest." Gayle shook her head slightly. "No, you're being disrespectful," the audience gasped. Meghan's mouth fell open a little. Gayle went on, each word crisp, measured, final. "We invited you here in good faith. We asked thoughtful questions. We have truly tried to give you room to share whatever you wanted. But instead of conversation, we've received contempt. Instead of dialogue, we've received attitude." Meghan shifted in her seat. I don't appreciate your tone, Gayle. Gayle leaned forward. And I don't appreciate being talked down to on my own show. Tony reached lightly toward Gayle's arm. Gayle, maybe, but she raised her hand, signaling she wasn't finished. I am not going to let this program turn into a showcase of arrogance, she said. Not today. Meghan's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you saying? Gayle met her gaze directly, steady and unapologetic. I'm saying this interview is over. A stunned silence filled the studio. Meghan, Gayle continued, I need to ask you to step off the set. We cannot continue the show like this. Meghan stared at her, speechless for the first time that morning. Tony and Nate remained frozen in place. Finally, Meghan rose slowly, gathering herself, though her face was stormy with indignation. This is unbelievable, she muttered under her breath. Gayle didn't flinch. Thank you for your time. Meghan turned sharply and walked off, her heels striking the floor with icy precision, leaving behind an audience holding its breath. As soon as she disappeared behind the curtain, Gayle exhaled and turned back to the cameras, professional, composed, resolute. We'll take a short break, she said softly. We'll be right back. The studio lights dimmed. The segment was over. The interview was finished. And Meghan Markle had been asked to leave CBS Mornings on live television. And that's how it ended, not with a polished exit, not with a neat PR moment, but with Meghan Markle being told to leave the CBS Mornings set after one of the most tense interviews daytime television has seen. What do you think? Was Gayle King right to shut it down, or did it go too far? If you enjoyed this intense breakdown and want more celebrity showdowns, royal conflicts, and behind-the-scenes tension, be sure to like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.